All right, everybody. So welcome to the Pendleton County CAIP informational meeting. This will serve as the informational meeting for the county cost share program. Again, many of you have been through this program in the past, but this is especially helpful as the rules do change from year to year. We have moved it up a couple weeks. The goal of it is to get it earlier into October in the future so that we have plenty of time and you have plenty of time to get those projects completed. But we have successfully moved it up by about 2 weeks, which has moved pretty much the whole timeline up by about 2 weeks. But this process started back in June as the councils began to meet and coordinate. So if you would go ahead and in the comment section in the chat box, if you could go ahead and type your name in, that will help us with attendance. If not, no worries. We'll take a screenshot of the screen to kind of go back and forth on. But if you can go ahead and just put your first and last name in there. And if you have anybody who's viewing with you, you can also go ahead and put them into the chat box because this meeting is not required, but there is a question that you can get credit for last year or this year as attendance on that application. So that will be our record of attendance this evening. So please try to stay with us until the end if you possibly can, but we'll get a screenshot of that. So we'll go ahead and turn it over and get started with information. We ask that you keep yourself muted until we get to questions. Once we get to the question slides, which we have integrated throughout, you can go ahead and either unmute your mic or you can just type into the chat box. Greg, if you can kind of help me watch the chat box, that would be great. And we'll try to get any of those questions that you have answered. This is a great time to get those. And if you don't want to ask tonight, Greg and I are just a phone call away or an email away, and we can definitely get that information off to you. All right, so just a little bit of background. I've been kind of keeping track of some of these charts for how the money's been spent, and I just think it's a little bit interesting for how the money has been invested here in Pendleton County. So you can take a look and see that, you know, we've had a lot of investments in large animal and farm infrastructure and fencing. They moved the genetics program to farm animal or large animal, so those numbers are even more impressive since they've been condensed. So you can definitely see where we've spent a lot of money. We have 4 very, very popular programs within Pendleton County. There are 11 total programs available that you can apply for, but there are definitely the ones that always shoot to the top, and that would be large animal, fencing and on-farm water, farm infrastructure, and forages. Now, over the years, we've seen increases in things like value added or agricultural diversification as folks have started to branch out a little bit more from some of those traditional crops and really look at like season extension or on-farm energy or just marketing. So there's a lot of opportunities and you can pick up rules for any of those guidelines to see what's eligible, because with all of this push for technology, you can even purchase technology through the Technology and Leadership program. So check that out in case you want to update your computer system or your record keeping system. There are some really great things and advantages to that that will help you with that. In addition, if you're looking at expanding your marketing, let's say you're in direct beef marketing and you're going through USDA expansion, you could do value added processing, and then that would help you on your direct to consumer sales journey. So lots of great things available, but you can kind of see how we've tracked over the last couple of years in some of those programs. And then you can take a look at the number of projects paid per year and the amount paid. Now, projects paid is different than farmers paid because technically each farmer who applies could technically fall into 3 project categories. So you can apply for up to 3, but you can only receive a maximum of $5,000 total across all 3. So you might get $2,000 back in one area, $2,000 back in another, or $1,000 back in one, but it's a total of $5,000. Now keep in mind, we're prorated. So if you see down here in 2017, where it says 72.25%, I'm getting way ahead of me now. Apologies, new computer today. But if you take a look at that where it says 72.25%, that's how much each producer got back of the $5,000 maximum. So if you look at 2020, each producer got 57.63%. So I think the maximum was $2,800. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
It's pretty close to that. So remember, even though it's 50-50 of 10,000, the maximum would be of your 100% you could actually get back would be 5,000. So then that's the number you're taking that percentage off of. So you're not guaranteed to get $5,000 because of the prorating. That way that we make that 184,000 or 186,000, 156,000 available to all. But this money that comes in, you can look for every dollar that you see there on the amount paid, there's a dollar invested by a farmer somewhere. And then sometimes $2 or $3 more, depending on the size and scope of the project. So this has definitely helped increase our property values, which I know is a double-edged sword. But when we talk to our leaders and talking about the importance of this funding, it's really making a huge impact on small Kentucky farms. And I would hope that each of you who've been successful in completing projects over the years would agree that the money is valuable and has helped you on your farm diversification. So if we talk a little bit about what is CAIP, CAIP is the County Agricultural Investment Program, and it is a cost share for farmers to expand and develop their farm enterprises. Now, a lot of people still call it phase one, but phase one was actually kind of the tobacco settlement payout for those producers who were raising tobacco. This program is now called the County Agricultural Investment Program. It's been that way for at least 10 years, where they've had kind of the menu options, which has been nice to allow producers the opportunity to fully participate. Prior to, there were funds that were available, but sometimes, you know, dairy was not a huge thing in the county, and unfortunately with priorities, it was not funded some years. So then when they went to this menu option, there was a lot of opportunities for everybody who's engaged in agriculture, as long as they're selling and justifying their product, we're able to gain some economic benefit and increase their farm profitability or expand a farm production. So that's a little bit about what CAIP is, and we'll call it CAIP from here on out instead of County Agricultural Investment Program. But this money, where does it come from? Everybody says the money's going to run out. The money's going to run out. Well, that's not necessarily true, because it's funded through the Kentucky Office of Agricultural Policy. Just this year, you'll notice that it's not GOAP anymore, it's KOAP. So that office has moved from the Governor's Office of Agricultural Policy to the Kentucky Office of Agricultural Policy. So now that board is housed and managed underneath the Kentucky Department of Agriculture instead of just the Governor's Office. So that move was instigated by agricultural leaders across the state, and now KDA will kind of be the oversight for that. And the funds are managed by the state legislature, and they're referred to as the Kentucky Ag Development Fund. So anything that you see that has this fun little green and blue logo on it with the tobacco leaf, that is funded through the Kentucky Ag Development. So if you've come to our office and you've seen our shared use equipment barn, that was funded through the Kentucky Ag Development Project, partially. The shared use equipment that the cattlemen's own was originally funded through this Kentucky Ag Development Fund in the very, very early stages. The Pelham County Farmers Market has even received state funds to help build their new farmers market structure. If you've been driving through Falmouth, you can take a look at that. So the KADF has really big overreach, and the money that comes into it, it's not taxpayer dollars. It comes from what they refer to as the MSA, or the Master Settlement Agreement. Now, I haven't updated these numbers this year, but this just kind of gives you a look at where the money comes from. So the Master Settlement Agreement comes from tobacco companies that produce products and sell tobacco products here within the state. The more products that are sold and purchased, the more money the state gets. So that was kind of the agreement from that Master Settlement Agreement, that for the sale of products or the production of products, that money has to be paid by the tobacco companies to the state of Kentucky because of the severe economic impact that the loss of major tobacco production has had on the state. So that master settlement agreement, all that money goes into there, and there's millions of dollars. And that money goes before the General Assembly. So again, our legislative body, and they essentially take half of that off and they split it down the middle almost for healthcare and early childhood and agriculture. Now you'll see between MSA and General Assembly that there's been a shift. Some money came off, and sometimes they'll pull money off for infrastructure projects for the state. But once they pull off a little bit for that infrastructure, then they're going down and they're splitting it between healthcare and early childhood, which has a lot of programs that are funded, and then to agriculture. And underneath of that agriculture, you can see that we fund farms to food banks for $500,000, the conservation districts, and then the Kentucky Ag Development Fund. So that's kind of the big pot that we're looking at and where our county funds come from. And that's the money that you're applying for is county funds. There are also state funds that help with the Kentucky Ag Finance Corporation. There are community farm grants. Kentucky Proud gets some funding through the state funds, as well as some research projects like the Crop Center for Excellence in Western Kentucky was a major project, or maybe some different agricultural organizations. But each county receives county funds. Those county funds were originally determined through calculation based on the tobacco dependency for the county. So they kind of came up with a number and a figure and an equation to be able to balance and try to make it as fair as possible. But there were a couple counties that didn't raise tobacco in Eastern Kentucky, so they never actually received any county funds all these years. So nothing was available to their farmers, and they're currently working on trying to get those counties and those farmers to apply for state funds and trying to make some money available to them. So we're very fortunate that our county has been traditionally based in tobacco production, and we had so many farmers who are engaged in that for so many years. Our neighboring county, Campbell County, they don't get a whole lot of money every year, so they're not able to offer the County Ag Investment Program, or CAIP, like we get here in this county. So just based on your demographics, consider yourself very fortunate, because not every farmer in Kentucky has the same opportunities necessarily to access the funds. So just keep that in mind as you kind of go forward in your appreciation. So take all this and then write to your representative and tell them how great this program is and how much it's helped you on your farm and how big of an impact it's made. So your House of Representative and your senators, reach out to them, even your county officials, make sure that they know that the Kentucky Ag Development Fund is something that helps you as a Kentucky farmer and a Pendleton County farmer specifically. So then that takes us to the administration of funds. And, this money that comes into the county, not all of it is meant for CAIP. The money is actually governed by a local council, which is the County Agricultural Council, which is the oversight board. So they kind of see that money. We have 2 appointed from FSA, 2 appointed from Extension, 2 appointed from Conservation, and then you have members at large. And that county council, which is all volunteered positions, they oversee and make sure that the money fits the needs for the farmers. So have we done CAIP here every year? Yes, we have, because it's a very important project. But the council has the right to administer money for that program or to take applications for those county funds that are going to be big things that are going to help a lot of farmers. So for instance, the shared use program. Shared use has applied for county dollars in the past to purchase equipment. They got a new small line buggy, if you're familiar with that. The Cattlemen's did. Farmers Market applied for $10,000 for the Farmers Market Pavilion, and then Conservation had applied for the dead animal removal. So there are other programs outside of CAIP that are overseen by the board or another agency who applies for those funds. So if you're interested in applying for county funds for some kind of regional marketplace type program or some kind of processing facility that's going to affect multiple farmers, give me a call. We can definitely talk about your ideas and kind of get your application in the process for that. But again, that type of application is meant to assist a multitude of farmers, where CAIP is meant specifically for you as a primary operator for your farm operation to help with diversification. So the administrator of CAIP in our county is the County Agricultural Diversification Board. Again, this is a volunteer position as well. They are not paid. So you can see the members of the County Oversight Council, which has Chairman Faye Godman. And then you have the County Diversification Board, which Robin Taylor is the chair of. And we have kind of varied roles. So there's two of us, myself and Greg Nash, who help to facilitate the program for you. My role is to oversee the county. I'm legally tied by KRS statute to the county council oversight. So I just kind of help them, provide them with information, but at the end of the day, they're the ones who make the decisions. The County Diversification Board is who Greg works for as the administrator, and Greg is officially the paper wrangler. So he is the one who you will talk to throughout the duration of the program. And you can ask either one of us questions. If you ask me a specific question like, hey, is this funded? If it's not black and white in the rules, I'm going to say, contact Greg and the board and we'll get you an answer. And sometimes we might contact the state just to verify, but that's going to kind of be the roles of the boards. So are there any questions? I know that's a lot of information, but it's really important to understand where the funding comes from, because we constantly hear, when's the money going to run out? Well, as long as tobacco products are produced and sold in the state of Kentucky, in theory, that money will go to the master settlement agreement, but then it's up to the legislative body to decide how much and where it goes. So that's why it's up to you to make sure you're using the funds correctly and appropriately and trying to follow all the rules for the program, but also sharing that information, sharing your story, consider hosting a field day, contacting your representatives, and making sure that you've got plenty of good, positive things to say about it. All right, if there are no questions, we'll keep rolling. So a big question is who's eligible to apply for CAIP? Well, technically it's any Pendleton County farmer who has a farm serial number from the Farm Service Agency, which is part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the applicant has to provide a social security number in addition, and the farm serial number for consideration. If you don't currently have a farm serial number, you'll want to call the Farm Service Agency here in the county and get an appointment scheduled. You'll need to take your deed and they will assign you a number. If your number is pending at the time of application, that is perfectly okay too, because we understand that they're running a lot of programs and they will do everything they can to get that information to you. But pending numbers are okay, but by the time the check has to be written, you have to have a secured farm serial number for your operation. So again, you can call the Farm Service Agency and we will make sure to get you that information. We'll follow up with everybody who's registered for the meeting tonight with any important links so that you can go ahead and get that started. So when you're applying, every county has different levels of funding. We've already talked about that a little bit, because like Campbell County doesn't get $210,000 a year. They only get a few $1,000s a year and not enough to run a full CAIP program. But Harrison County is on a different schedule. Grant County is on a different schedule. And there are some options that are made available in far as how to run the program. In Pendleton County, the council has made the full amount that is possible available to you of the $5,000, but they have also made the determination to prorate. That way that it doesn't matter that only, anybody who scores above an 80 would get approved, and then everybody else, when you get close to the deadline, you're like, oh, you got 2 weeks to turn in your project, which is what a lot of other counties do. The prorating approves anybody that's above a 60. Anybody who's above a 60 that turns in eligible receipts will get the same percentage back across the board of how much they've spent. So remember, the most you can get back is 5,000, but you're not guaranteed that. So that's technically the 100%. So where we were at 57%, we paid you 50%, 57% of 5,000. So those are important things to consider. As far as this year's in Pendleton County, applications will be available starting tomorrow, October 22nd. We have the front lobby and the front office set up for you so that you can take a look and see all the paperwork. It's all lined out by arrows. And you'll pick up the application packet, which you will for sure need. It has the orange sheet on front and all the paperwork you need. And then you will have until November 12th by 3 p.m. to get your completed application turned back into us. We are also going to make a drive-through service. So if you have not been through our drive-through during COVID, we are going to expand that because we realize that the office hours are a little limited. So we're going to keep a small box of all the materials in the back that you can sort through and file through. They'll be under the overhang behind the building on a picnic table. And they're in a box, and it'll kind of, we have like a little cheat sheet on the front that says everybody needs this packet. If you're a tenant farmer, you'll need the tenant farmer form, and so on and so forth. But we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty here in a minute. And then we have a new requirement this year, and technically it was last year, but now an ag water quality plan has to be up to date and complete within 5 years on file at the Pendleton County Conservation Office prior to final approval. So if you have not already had an ag water quality plan, anyone who applied last year, you should have one on file. If you want to update it because you fenced out your ponds or creeks or implemented rotational grazing, you could go ahead and go over there and update that. And then you get points for it if you update it within the last 5 years. But if you have not filed one, you can also pick those up. We have that paperwork available for you here at the office, so you can go ahead and go through that. And it's been required by law since 1993 for any agricultural producer or even a silviculture producer, so forestry, to have an ag water quality plan on file. And water quality is a top priority for the state of Kentucky right now, especially in some of our urban areas. There's a big MS4 push, which is really kind of driving this. So ag water quality plan is required, just like a social security number or a farm serial number. All right, any questions? All right, so once you apply and you get that application back to us by November 12th, you will be scored based on a state rubric. So each answer to every question is weighted by the state. We don't see the rubric until afterwards, but we'll have a scoring committee, which is made up of our extension homemakers. So they volunteer their time. That way that they have no skin in the game. There's no bias. There's no anything of that nature. But you have to score a minimum of a 60. There are 138 points, I believe, eligible on the application. And there is no right or wrong answer. It's only the truthful answer. And we'll definitely go through that a little bit more, but it's 130 points possible this year. But again, you just have to score a minimum of a 60. Any questions so far? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Greg, and Greg's going to walk us through the timeline of this year's program.
Hey, welcome everybody to the meeting here. This is building as it a little slow, but I'll start at the beginning. It'll catch up to me, or I'll catch up to it. So we've kind of already gone over what our application period is. It starts tomorrow and goes through November 12th. And when we say November 12th, that's a Friday, and it has to be in by 3 o'clock. So don't miss that, that 3 p.m. deadline. At that point, the scoring committee will get together after I've gone through them. And here's the process for that. It does take some time. So I initially go through those applications. I look for errors. I do an initial scoring, kind of make sure everything is the way it should be. And I'm sure if you guys did it last year, some of you may have gotten calls from me. I want to make sure everything is right. And then when I take those to the committee, the ladies will sit down and go through them and verify that the scoring is correct. Occasionally they'll find one that I didn't get right. And so we correct them and we make sure that everything is correct. And once that is done, then I will do the letter portion. So I will be drafting letters, approvals or disapprovals, and I will send those out. And hopefully those will all be out at the latest. I didn't quite get us moved up as far as I wanted us to this year. So it's kind of still going to be over the Thanksgiving holiday. So it will be into December, and I'll get those letters out to you hopefully within the first week of December. Once you have that, of course, many of you would be looking at, probably already have your projects completed. And we'll talk a little bit about the dates that we can do that here at the bottom. You'll see the dates that receipts are acceptable. We will have until July 1st on the next year to bring all of our paperwork in. Of course, we're going to spend some time going over what that looks like. And most of you already know that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Once the projects are turned in, then the process is for me to make sure everything is there. And I think most of you realize that you're going to get phone calls from me, because my hope is that I'm going to help everybody. If there's something missing, we're going to try to get it all put together. And that does take a little bit of time too. But my goal is to have the checks out prior to this August 31st date. But I'm just giving myself plenty of time to make sure that those checks are, everything is done correctly and everybody gets the checks that they need. So lastly, of course, on this slide, eligible receipts are from April 11th, of 21. So April of this year, all the way through July 1st of 2022. And we'll be looking and checking those dates as we always do. I'm not sure if there's any questions on that, but that's the timeline. And I think most of us are pretty used to it if you've not done this before. It's easy to keep up with. Okay, Lindy?
All right. So like Greg said, once you are go through the application process, you can select up to 3 of these projects that have to be completed at the time of application. So we can't change those once you get started. So then that kind of helps make sure that you kind of have a plan for the funding of how it's going to diversify your farm. We encourage you, even if you're like, I am certain I am going to build a barn. Well, we encourage you to go ahead and apply for 3 programs instead of just farm infrastructure, because things happen. The supply chain was so messed up due to COVID, and we're still dealing with it, that for people who thought that they were going to build hay storage facilities like hoop barns, it was down to the deadline and they had a lot of things installed, but they were worried about not being able to complete their project on time because of the delays in processing and manufacturing. So you can apply for up to 3, but remember, you're only going to get 5,000 across the board for that total, right? So your approved applicants, you also have to meet prerequisites for approved projects. So for instance, for large animal, you have to have BQCA training, or beef quality care and assurance training. That has to be valid as of August 31st of 2022. So you'll want to make sure that you get that up to date. We will be offering the program through the extension office, in person as needed, but there's also the virtual option, which is very convenient for a lot of folks to be able to update. That training is good for 3 years. So just keep that in mind as you move forward. But there may be other things like minimum herd sizes. In order to buy handling facilities under large animal, there are requirements for how many head, regardless of if you're, or dependent on if you are backgrounding or a cow-calf operation. If you don't have the minimum herd size and they come out and you buy handling facilities, unfortunately, you're not going to get paid for the project. So you'll want to make sure at the front of every rule section, which is what we call the Skittles pages, you'll see all of those rules. It'll say prerequisite for this, and it'll have notes like how long you have to maintain your herd, or how big your herd size is, or if you have to have a specific training in order to qualify. So make sure you have those. And then you have to have itemized receipts and proof of payments for all transaction. So an itemized receipt has to specifically tell me what you purchased. It can't just be that you paid somebody $500 and it doesn't tell me what for. Every item that was paid for has to be listed out, because there are specific things that are covered and other things that are not. You cannot buy tractors. You cannot buy side-by-sides. You can't buy wagons. There are very limitations on any kind of motorized equipment. There is no motorized equipment, but technically you could buy a manure spreader under large animal under waste handling facilities. So those are things to consider. If you have questions, always make sure that you reach out to the board, reach out to Greg, and we will clarify anything for you to make sure that it falls underneath that particular category for you. That way that you can make sure you're covered. So once you are approved, you can also attend any educational class except for GAP, VQA, and pesticide training. Those 3 classes do not qualify as your educational component because they are a prerequisite for many of the others. So if you look at the Grazing Gazette in the back on that chart, I say, does it qualify for CAIP? CAIP approved? Yes. That means you can go to that class, fill out your orange sheet, and that class will qualify. If it says no, then that class is not approved for CAIP in any capacity. And that's because it's either a pre-required meeting or it's just like kind of a for fun meeting more so than an educational class. But we will send emails out. So it's very important that you get us your up-to-date contact information because we will get the Grazing Gazette, which will have things in it, which are normally kind of a month out. But for timely things, and like, let's say your week changed, it's really easy to send out a quick email. That way that we can get that information out to you in a timely manner. And I can share links as we continue to have these virtual opportunities that just kind of pop up. For statewide opportunities or other counties, sometimes I don't know about the class until the day of the class or the week before, and it's hard to get a mailing out like that. So then that's another advantage of that. Also, you will need to submit all your required documentation by July 1st, 2022. If you have a phone and you keep a calendar, go ahead and say, hey Siri, set reminder for June 1st, 2022, CAIP deadline. You can talk to your phone and utilize that as a tool. Now I said June 1st. Why did I say June 1st? It's a month before to make sure that you can get all your paperwork required. So if you can go ahead, get your phone out, set a reminder in your phone, in the calendar, your phone will send you a message and it will say June 1st, start getting CAIP paperwork together. July 1st is the absolute deadline by 3 p.m. No receipts or no paperwork will be received after that. And I try to go through it as a courtesy check to make sure your big ticket things are there. Do you have itemized receipts? Do you have proof of payment, including for credit cards? That would be a copy of your bank statement. Same thing for checks. It has to be from the bank. You can't write a check and take a picture of it and give me the picture of it. Because I could write, you could write me a check for $1,000 and take a picture of it, but I never actually cashed it or received it. So they want to see that it has actually cleared your bank. But all of that is due back July 1st. Write it down, set a reminder on your phone. It's also all over your paperwork. And this year we've printed fridge reminders. So half sheets of paper that you can stick to your refrigerator that have all of the important dates for you on it. So anything to make you successful, that's what we're here for. The checks for the completed projects will be written by August 31st of 2022. So no one will receive any payment until at minimum August of 2022. So that July 1st deadline gives Greg a couple of weeks to get things prepared in nice packages for the board so that the board can sit down and review all of those and go through each itemized receipt and then also do farm visits. So those will all be important things. And then the big question we've kind of talked about, but I'm going to turn it over to Greg for this one.
Yeah, many times we have producers who spend quite a bit more than the $10,000 maximum that we judge from. I saw several barns this year that were in the $30,000 ranges. And when you start doing fence work and work on a barn or you purchase some piece of equipment, you can get above that $10,000 very quickly. And I did have a person that was a first-time participant that thought they would get 50% of their entire amount spent. And unfortunately, that's not the case. It's only going to be 50% of the first $10,000 that you spend. So when I'm doing the math and I'm reviewing the projects, if you've done 3 projects, I try to go back through those and I make some adjustments sometimes. So on one of your projects, you may not get quite what you thought you were going to get. And that's because I had to make an adjustment because your other 2 projects were a little bit larger and they took up a larger portion of that $10,000 amount. So I had some questions about checks this time. And of course, I know this was the lowest year we've had. But the way I do that is I take a total amount of $10,000 per person. Even if you spend more, I'm only going to give you credit up to that $10,000. Then I'm going to take half of that to see if I can give people that $5,000 amount. Once I know the amount of money I can pay out, which this year is great, it's $210,000, and I have the amount of money that was spent that was eligible. Okay, so it fell within the eligible category, and it was up to that $5,000 or $10,000 spent. Then I do the math, I do the division, and it tells me that percentage that I can pay. I do that all up front. And the reason I do that is because I want everyone to get paid out equally. You know, I don't want to pay someone more of a higher percentage because maybe they turned it in earlier or they were the first ones or they're in the line up first. So I do that. I put everything together, come up with the total amounts. I do that math process. And so this year we were only able to pay 57.63%, but that's of the $5,000. So if you actually were eligible to have received $5,000, you only received 57.63% of that, unfortunately. I'm hoping this year that that payout percentage will be higher. I know a lot of farmers struggled this year to get their projects done, but we did still have quite a few completed. 118 were completed. So we still had some good projects completed in our county. Now, some things that might change the amounts, going back a couple of slides where she was talking about receipts that are required. Try your very best to make sure the receipts are clean. And what I mean by clean is they only have items that you purchased for that particular project. Don't throw in a couple of sodas and don't throw in some chips when you're at the store, and that's easy to do. If you want to do that, purchase them separately so that they're not on the clean receipt. It just makes it easier for us to figure out. The other thing is there are some things that are not eligible. And one of the biggest ones this year was because I think everybody was ordering things and we're not allowed to pay for shipping. So if you had a large shipping amount, then you probably weren't able to recoup that, because if we see it, we're going to be subtracting it. So if you do get a check from me this year and you have questions about the amount, please don't hesitate to call. I don't mind a bit. I'll be glad to sit down with you. I'll pull your file out when I'm home and we'll look at it together and I can explain every bit of that to you, and I'd be glad to do it. But honestly, the board and we work real hard to make sure we can pay out as much as we can to everyone in a fair way. So I feel good about our board. I'll just brag on them for a little bit. They worked hard. One of the things that also happens before I send out any checks is I have to go out and look at all the capital projects. And so previous years, it's never been very many, maximum of 13. This year, we did approximately 50 farm visits that had to be completed before I could mail out the checks. And our board stepped right up and assisted with that, went out to some farms and did some of those farm visits. And we do that as part of making sure that nobody is not doing what they're telling us they're doing, for one. And the other one is, I'll tell you, I have a great time. I really enjoy going to the farms and meeting people and seeing what you're doing. It's just a lot of fun for me. I just enjoy that. So a lot of things have to happen in the works before the checks go out, but I feel confident that that date of August 31st, we're going to beat that this year and get those checks out. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that.
All right. Thank you, Greg.
Yep.
All right. And if anybody has any questions, remember you can always use the chat too or unmute yourself. So now I know that for some of you, this is old hat, but a lot of the information that we're telling you is really important because we see the same things every year. And we try to give you the tools for you to be successful and answer the questions, but really make sure that, you know, the board, the council, you are all adhering to the guidelines that are set forth by the state. That way that we can keep the money going. So now we're going to transition and really get into kind of what is available, like what can you apply for. So we've talked about where the money comes from, what to expect once you've been approved, and some of those really specific rules and how much you can apply for. But, you know, what is available? There's actually 11 investment program areas. I've never updated that number. But if you look through here, each one of these has a color next to it. And the reason that we have that color next to it is because that's the color of paper that it's printed on, so that we can make sure that it's standard. So one of the investment areas is agricultural diversification. So just to give you a kind of brief overview, that's going to be your commercial horticulture. So if you want to buy plants or plugs or pots, you can purchase that through there. Commercial aquaculture is going to help you with specific pond management for aeration and tools that you would need to ensure the survival of your aquatic species. And then timber production, you can get portable sawmills sometimes within that program. So if you're interested in any of those three kind of main areas of horticulture, aquaculture, or silviculture, you can apply for ag diversification. Large animal is one of the most popular that we do, and that's going to be where you're going to purchase live animals, so genetics for your herd, as well as handling facilities, and then equine. They're continuously expanding on what's eligible throughout the equine project to make sure that the horse capital is meeting the needs of our equestrians as well. Small animal is going to be your goat and sheep, swine, bees, and rabbits. And then farm infrastructure is another major program, and that's going to be your farm storage. So whether you're building a hay storage facility or building a barn, building a greenhouse, renovating existing structures into livestock handling facilities, or on-farm composting, farm infrastructure would be the program for you. Fencing and on-farm water is pretty self-explanatory. You can get ponds cleared out, lay water, and lay fence line, including both perimeter and boundary fencing. Forage and grain improvement will assist with the purchase of certified seed and equipment rentals for spray and those kind of things, but herbicide is not eligible under the program anymore. You can do hired spraying, but not your own spraying. So that's a little glitch in the rules. But under forage and grain improvement, it's also important to note that things like hay rings are found underneath of that program under commodity handling. So if you're looking for an attachment for your front end loader or a distribution system, this would be a rule packet to pick up to look through, because it's pretty specific on what it covers. You can also do grain storage in that as well. On-farm energy efficiency and production is going to be any on-farm energy like solar panels or renovating existing structures to be more energy efficient. That's really a lot bigger down in Western Kentucky, where they have large poultry houses, or they're doing compact bedding and those kind of things in some of their CAIP operations. But it's not as popular of a program here, but I encourage you to pick it up if that might be something you're interested in. Poultry and other fowl, again, pretty self-explanatory. And then technology and leadership development. So again, if you are looking to expand your farm enterprise and you want to explore options of record keeping, you can purchase the computer, you can purchase a laptop, an iPad, you can purchase programs to go with that. So that's something to be encouraged and take a look at as we continue to move. I do have hopes of doing some farmer basic computer training in the future so that we can kind of help some of those want to feel more comfortable, because I've had some individuals come to me, so that could help you out in that regard as well. And then value added in marketing is going to be for direct consumer sales. So if you have products that you are putting in front of a general consumer, like beef or vegetables or yarn or honey or whatever, value added marketing might be a place for you to consider looking. And then the new one that was developed, I think last year or 2 years ago, was innovative agricultural systems. So this actually takes into account a lot of the practices and implementation that they're using at Eden Shell Farm. So on-farm water harvesting is a big one of that program. And it's pretty specific of the guidelines of how to be eligible for that. We do have a producer here in the county that has expanded and actually implemented their own model of Eden Shell here in the county, and we're hoping to do a field day in the future as well. So those are the 11 different program areas that are eligible for investment, and that's going to encourage you to pick up what we call, again, those Skittles papers. So you can make note now, like what color it is, that'll help you move through the system. But then in the stack, we have the top 4, which are large animal, farm infrastructure, fencing off from water, and forage and grain improvement at the very top of the rack here at the extension office to kind of help you out.
Hey,
we do have a question on the chat box, and it asks if there's going to be any more events. Of course, there's going to be more events. The events are all throughout the winter months. Typically, my event educational window is going to be November through April. So if you haven't got your educational component by April, you might have to get a little bit more creative. There might be a field day, but most of the time I try to focus those on the winter months, because let's face it, once hay season starts and the sun starts shining, you all are not coming to a meeting. So I try to be for the sake of your time and my time, but there will be plenty, and they will be advertised through the Grazing Gazette and through email. All right, so this is pretty much the biggest rule change this year. If you are purchasing bulls and heifers, this is the old part, they require pre-notification on your investment area selection page. That page we'll cover here more in detail later, but it's the last page of your application. And again, I've got a copy that we'll pull up, but you have to actually tell us if you plan on purchasing bulls and if you plan on purchasing heifers. Even if you don't think so, if you apply for a large animal, go ahead and mark yes. We don't hold you to it. But if you don't mark it, or you mark no and you purchase them later, you will not be paid for it. So that's part of the planning process. There is some talk about the evolution of the CAIP program and actually having to have like miniature business plans potentially to apply for that and apply for this program. So just note that that is a very, very small thing that can make or break you. And it doesn't take a whole lot. Just go ahead and mark yes. If you apply for large animal, go ahead and mark yes, just to cover your bases. Your bulls also have to fall in one of 2 of your pre-selected categories. There's 6 categories available for your bull, but when you purchase it, it has to fall in one of those 2. Now, just because the guy that you purchase your bulls from, or the lady, says, well, yeah, this one qualifies for the program, that may or may not be true. But if you marked heifer acceptable and that bull is not heifer acceptable, but it's a carcass merit, and you didn't mark carcass merit, you will not be paid for that bull. And that goes for your semen too. So if you're doing AI, that also goes for your semen that you're purchasing as well. So they have to fall within those bull categories. And that's to help you make sure that you're trying to, again, advance your herd. This money is meant to increase or expand upon an enterprise. So just keeping that in mind. So now for the big one. Those 2 were the old ones, but they're still important because every year somebody forgets to mark yes on that. But if you mark large animal, Greg will call you and he will say, are you sure that you don't want to mark yes? Are you sure? And then he'll talk to you about the same thing for the bulls. Are you sure you haven't picked 2 categories? And if you have questions, please ask us. Please ask ahead of time if you're like, I don't know what kind of bull I need. we can have that conversation and we can walk you through and tell you the two that might fit your herd best. But new for 2021, all bulls have to be genomically tested. So genomic testing is new technology, but it's been in the industry for a few years. And basically it's to add value to the bull, right? So they are running expected progeny differences. So that was kind of like expectant, where genomic testing is actually a physical test that predicts how functional that bull will be in certain areas. So what that means is we're going to have your registration papers, like always, for your bulls, but we're also going to have proof of that genomic test. That's not always on your breed papers. So you'll have to make sure that whoever your breeder is or your breed association, that you'll have to get a copy of the genomic test from them. Sometimes that will show up on the online version of the bull's numbers and it'll say genomically tested, but it's not something that's really industry standard. But if the bull is not genomically tested and there is no proof, you will not be paid for the bull. Now, as far as questions go, we will have another educational component that explains EPDs, but also talks more in depth about the genomic testing. So if you're considering purchasing a bull and you're like, what in the heck are you talking about? Go ahead and sign up for one of those classes. We have not got those dates scheduled. It will probably be February or March before we have those classes scheduled. But in your paperwork packet, there is a QR code on the checklist page. So if you'll remember, we developed a checklist for you here in county to help you through your paperwork, but there's a little QR code that you can open your phone and you can scan that and it'll take you to a quick video, a very short video on what genomic testing is, and that will help you. But if you have questions, please call us, because we don't want this to make or break you as far as being approved or not being approved for the program. Okay. Are there questions about that? That is the biggest rule change for 2021. And I almost guarantee you, I don't want to see it happen, but I almost guarantee you that someone will turn a bull in that's not genomically tested and we'll have this conversation. But I don't want that to happen. So if you have questions, please call us. Please reach out to us.
Hey, Lindy, I got a question.
Uh-huh.
On where you said if you're going to buy heifers or a bull, if you select that, if you check that paper as yes, well, like, you know, there's a lot of the bred heifer sales are coming up. The one in Paris is November 1st, which is before the application process is over. If we check that yes, does that fit that criteria, even though we won't, even though if we're approved before?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely. So the good answer is to just go ahead, because that's the only one that kind of makes or breaks you. So even though you might purchase beforehand, you can go ahead and put yes. On the bulls, go ahead and select 2 bull categories just to be safe, but your retroactivity is going to protect you. Now, had you marked no or not marked it, got through the application process, and you had purchased your heifers before and come up to the end of the program and you tried to turn the receipt in, then you wouldn't have been paid even though it was in the retroactive. So just marking yes would be sufficient.
Lindy, I've got a question.
All right, John.
The AI semen, is that genomically already tested or not? Most of it,
So,
maybe?
Some of it is. Some of it is. So it's going to be dependent. So that's where you're going to want to talk to your AI guy or do a little bit of research. Now, certain services have it denoted, right? So when you pull up that little bull profile on the website, it will say genomically tested. But it depends. Very good questions. Any other questions? All right, if not, we will move on. But again, if you have questions, please call myself, please call Greg. We will walk you through it as best we can. All right, so there are a lot of various cost share items that we have not gone through because we would be here all night, and I know it already feels that way. But please read your rules, read your Skittles paper. If you don't see something on a particular program or you can't find it, message Greg, message myself, and we'll try to find it for you. Some things, sorry y'all, you can't buy a new pickup truck, all right? You can't buy a new tractor, but there are a lot of things that are buried in some of these programs that might be beneficial for your farm operation. So just please read through those rules. We have this still on this presentation. It says farm infrastructure does now include the option to store farm equipment. For so many years, it was only hay storage. And if your tractor was in there and your hay was outside, we'd have a little talking to you. But now you can store your farm equipment inside, which makes sense. And then fencing. So KRS statute 256 is what we're following for perimeter fencing. So perimeter fencing, Greg and I own fence line. We own 500-foot fence. So KRS statute says that regardless of livestock present, Greg is responsible for 50% of that fence, and I am responsible for 50%. So if we walked up to each other in the middle, and he looked to his right, and we faced each other, he'd be responsible for that 250, and I'd be responsible for my 250. So what that means is, if you replace 100% of the fence, technically you're only going to get paid for 25% of it. Because technically under KRS statute, 50% of that fence is yours and 50% of it is your neighbor's. So that's only for perimeter fencing with a neighbor. Now, what if you border the highway? If you border the highway, you get 50% of what you paid for your fence. If you border the river, you get 50%. If you border the railroad tracks, you get 50%. But if you border your neighbor, you'll get 25% of that perimeter fencing. Interior fencing, you get 50% of regardless. Okay? Assuming prorating and those kind of things. But that's the rule that we follow is KRS 256. So if you have questions, you can pull that up and take a look at it. Any questions? A few more housekeeping rules. Greg?
Yeah, I think you covered most of these pretty well. We'll just go through them real quick in case someone may have not been able to pay attention to it. I think it's a known deal that we can't accept any cash receipts, and that does make it difficult from time to time, but we do have to have a check or credit card or money order. We can do any of those. Also, with the receipts, it must have that proof of payment. And your receipts, they need to show what you actually purchased. So sometimes we get a receipt and it doesn't really say we paid so-and-so some kind of funding, but it doesn't really say what the funding was for. So try to keep them as accurate as you possibly can. That just helps the board when they go through all of those. And we are looking for both the receipt and proof of payment. I have to have both of those. And this year I had to make a lot of calls, which is fine. I don't mind doing that at all. And I hope everybody was comfortable when I did make those calls, because my job is to make sure we have everything we need for the state. And so I'm going to be calling, and if there's something missing, I'm going to call. I'm going to try to have all those things put together and work with you to get those things. And I do understand sometimes at the very last minute you write a check, and so it doesn't clear through the bank for several days. But the deadline is, of course, the deadline, and you have to get your paperwork in. We can work with that. And the board is really good about working with farmers and producers to make sure that, you know, we're not holding us to a standard that we're not trying to help you with. We'll be glad to help any way we can. Credit card statements are the same way. We do require that credit card statement. You can redact all the information off of it you want, but what we want to be able to see is where you made the purchase, and then it matches up with the receipt that you gave us. So that credit card statement will match up with the receipt. Occasionally I know that, and this is why I brought it up earlier, you go to a store and you buy $100 worth of materials, but only $75 of those are for your project. And what happens is I'm going to have a receipt for $100 and I'm going to have your check for $100, but you're going to only claim the 75 that actually goes to the project. Those kind of things we can make sense out of. Typically, we can see that and we can understand those things. But if the receipts and the checks don't match, then there may be a time I'll have to call you and ask for clarification on those. And again, the checks, Lindy had already mentioned this, but the checks we want to see the canceled check copy from the bank. And I don't know of any banks that don't do this. You can contact the bank, or if you have online access to your accounts, you can go in and print your own check copies out. And typically they'll be available a few days after you write the check and it clears the bank. So she was pretty clear on that, but if anybody ever has a question about what they need, please feel free to contact me or Lindy and we'll walk through you with that. I think that covered that one pretty well, Lindy. You already covered it pretty well. All right, so we talked about, and we had that question about if you go purchase your cows before you even know if you're approved, do they qualify? And they really, actually they do. There is a retroactivity based on when the contracts are signed. It goes back 6 months. And for us, the dates, of course, we go back to April 11th. So some of you may have done some things that maybe didn't qualify, or you've already done some of your own projects. If the dates are between April 11th and July 1st of 2022, those receipts would qualify for the program and would be accepted for payment. We're prorating. I think we talked about that. And of course, last but not least, all projects have to be turned in by July 1st. That's a Friday. And I will do my very best to have the checks out by the 31st, if not sooner. Any questions on that, anybody?
I'm sorry, it's John Fitzpatrick again. Can I go back on AI semen? From what I hear, maybe if we purchase the bull, we have to have them genomically tested. But if we do the semen, we possibly do not. Is that correct?
No, the bulls will be, bull semen will also be required to have genomically testing on it. So in some cases, again, like when you go to a breed website, when you're looking at the semen catalog, it will say genomically tested. It is hard to find sometimes on some of those. I wish I had an example to pull up for you really quickly, but I do not. I might work on that here in a minute to pull that up, John. But it will also have to be genomically tested as well.
Okay.
All right. If there are no questions about some of those specific rules, we're going to move into the application packet really quick. So your application packet is 36 pages. Now, do not be alarmed, for this 36-page document has everything that you will need from the board and from us to make you successful. All right. So when we look at this, your front page is actually the orange page. And what do we call it? Your carrot, because it's your receipt and it's also your educational component on the back. So on the front of this form, if you have your orange sheet, you will have all the information you need as far as dates and what you need to turn in. Now it's a simplified checklist here as far as what it is, but once you're approved, you'll need your itemization form, which are the green sheets. You'll need copies of all your itemized receipts, proof of payment, which is copies from your bank, your producer's report. This is provided in the packet, but please do not fill it out at the time of application. That form is meant to be turned in after you complete your project. And we saw a lot of them that still had your estimated numbers on it, but that is actually what you have physically completed on your farm. So please do not do that until after you are approved. And then your educational requirement. So your application process will start tomorrow because we'll have all the applications available here at the extension office, as well as, remember, we'll have the drive-through option so that you can pull around behind the building in case it's after hours and you can pick up your application as needed. The deadline is November 12th, 2021. So 3 p.m. is when you'll need to get that turned in. Now, if you look at this packet, there are actually these cover pages. So you'll notice this one says upon completion. This one is July 1st. So the only thing that you will turn in is page 27 to 36, because it's actually at the back of your packet, which I know you can't see in my video because of how it's set up, because I disappeared. But the yellow pages, this year we made the actual application yellow. So unless you're a tenant farmer, the only paperwork you'll actually turn into us is the yellow. But when you come to the office, let us help you. We know what we're looking for. Just keep your packet together and we'll make copies of what you need to keep and we'll hand it back to you. So just bring that in, but the only thing you have to fill out now is the yellow packet. Everything else is what you'll need for the duration of the program. So your educational form, your producer report, your itemization forms, which that's what these are. So if you went to Howman Hardware and you paid check, you would write Howman Hardware in the line. And then you put check number, whatever, and then you put the purchase amount. So those are all the forms that you need. There are important dates. There are the general producer guidelines. So the rules on household, only one individual per household can apply. So they changed this. It's eligible to apply, not you both apply and see who scores higher. It's only one of you may apply. That is done by residency through your driver's license or photo. So you can only one apply. If the tenant and landowner, only one can apply. So you have to have a tenant owner agreement, which we have the paperwork for at the front office. You'll have to have the owner and yourself sign and submit that. And that form is available, not in the packet, but available for pickup, because only some people will need that. But a tenant and farmer and landowner are both eligible to apply with separate farm serial numbers. However, you both can't receive funds for the same program. So even if you have two separate farm serial numbers, they will have to be two separate programs. So you both can't apply for fencing. You both can't apply for large animal. They have to be two completely separate ones. So these producer guidelines and responsibilities can also determine your approval or denial, right? So remember, social security number is important, and the tenant owner. But remember, your proof of residency can be asked for and must match the address provided on your CAIP application. So a couple years ago, we required driver's licenses from everybody. We haven't determined if that's what we're doing yet or not this year. Okay, so but this is your packet. So again, on the front is your receipt, your orange paper, and on the back is your educational requirement. There's some memos in here, which are 3 pages. On the back of each of those cover pages, so if I go back down here, sorry, I'm jumping around, but once you get your packet, it should be pretty self-explanatory. So the first yellow page is this page that's pulled up on your screen, and it says deadline November 12th. So everything in this section is to be filled out and submitted. Again, they're all yellow. On the back of this, there are some frequently asked questions that are quick reference guides for helping you. So ag water quality plan is discussed, farm serial number, tenant farmers, and then the investment area selection, because remember, that's a very important piece, which is the very last page. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Greg, and we're going to go through the application briefly. And then we will see if there are any other questions and try to get some answers for you. All right.
So if you're looking at the front page, it's not changed from previous years really at all. There are some things that we'd really like for you to fill in that sometimes I have to reach out and get. So when you give phone numbers, make sure it's a good phone number that I can contact you on. And if you have a cell phone, that's very helpful. Then your farm serial number there in the middle. If for tax purposes, we do have to have your social security number, but there is a spot down there for a tax ID. If you happen to have a tax ID, it's not required, but the social security number is. I was trying to look at that. Also, if your farm address is different from your mailing address. So up at the top, you're going to give us your mailing address. If the farm address is different, then please put it down there if you can. It just helps us when we find it. We'll scroll on down. I don't see anything that's too much different there on there. Okay. It's going to ask you, have you done CAIP before? Yes or no? Anybody else in your household CAIP funds in this or another county? And that's one of the things that I look for. And you can actually, if you have a farm that covers multiple counties, you can apply in multiple counties for CAIP. However, you're only going to be able to get $5,000 total, no matter how many counties you may cover or how many programs you do. So kind of keep that in mind and let us know if you cover multiple counties. And then list those for us so we'll know. I don't think I really need to go down through that very much further. You just want to answer the questions as truthfully and make sure and sign where you need to. Now, there are some questions here at the very beginning. They're in a square box and they point those out to you because they are fairly important. One of them, of course, is, have you ever done CAIP before? And then the other question is, in previous years. So I know we had a lot of farmers who were struggling to get their projects completed. They reached out and let us know that. And if you look down here for question 2, there's a couple of different answers you can put. I was approved for funding, but did not complete my project is one answer. And I was approved for funding, but notified the administrator that I would not use those funds. So reason I point that out is these answers are different and the scoring is different. And I wanted to point that out to you because it's important that if you run into some problems with your projects, reach out to me, I'll get in touch with the board and we'll see what we might be able to do to help so that when you apply for next year, you will know what the correct answer for that question is. The rest of these are fairly familiar. I don't think they changed any of the rest of the questions here. Question 6 really is important because it determines for the state if you're really a farmer or not. If you're a farmer, then you're probably doing a Schedule F or a Schedule C. And you want to make sure, if you don't know that, if you have an accountant, you want to check with your accountant. We'll scroll on down. I don't want to go through every question, but I do want to stop here. So if you look at question 13, where it talks about 6 best management practice are your BMPs from your water quality plan. There are 6 blanks there, and you want to be able to fill in all of them because a blank is going to have points associated with it. So if you only answered 3, if you only give me 3 of your BMPs or what your water quality plan is, you're giving up basically half of the points that this question would be worth. And so take a little bit of time on these questions where you have these blanks to fill in and get an answer and fill in the blanks. They are there for a reason and they are a part of the score. Okay. Let me scroll on down there. Yeah. I'll tell you, I do have to check a lot of these questions out. So because it's mandatory now, I have a pretty good list of water quality plans, but we do have a question up here. Have you updated your ag water quality plan within the last 5 years? If you're new, or if you just did it last year, unless you go back and redo it this year, you didn't update it. And so those are things that I do check for to make sure if you do a new plan this year, that you don't get credit for the 5-year update, if that makes sense. So those dates are looked at, they are maintained over in the office, and I do check for those. Looking down here at the rest of these questions, I don't know, are there any of these other ones, Lindy, that stand out to you? Not too
No,
much.
not really. Just
Yeah.
making sure that whatever you, if you mark yes on a question, again, make sure that you put in a answer in the blank.
Yes. And if you have a question about a question, give me a call. I'll be glad to sit with you and we'll discuss it and then help you figure out what the right answer is if you're not sure. And if you scroll on down, there's some places for some signatures that are really important, and the dates. You want to make sure and sign these, because if you don't, then I have to reach back out to you and get together with you and get you to sign it for us. Okay. We do have a question that just came up about they did a water plan a couple of years ago. That is sufficient. Typically, we're looking at an update at least every 5 years, and that's why that question is in there. So if you did one a couple of years ago, that is sufficient for CAIP. That will meet the qualification. This CAIP producer affidavit is important to us because we are looking to see if you're sharing facilities, are sharing equipment, commingling livestock. We do look at all that stuff, and we do know that it can happen. And we're just looking for honest answers there, not looking for anything that's not trying to hide anything or have you guys feel uncomfortable. It's just looking to make sure how everything goes. There is a signature page there. Make sure and sign it. Yep, right there. And then if you scroll down, this is the last page in our packet. We put it back here on the back because we can keep track of it easier. This is where you're going to select your 3 categories for investment areas. I had several producers this past year only select one item, and that didn't give them any options if they couldn't do that one item. And that's what Lindy spoke about earlier. Please go ahead and select 3 because you only have to complete 1 to have completed a project and be qualified in everything that you've done. But 3, if you choose 3, gives you a couple of other options if your first plan doesn't work out. Under large animal, if you're looking at that, this is where Lindy was talking about. You have to select for your bull categories, and there's a yes or a no for heifers. And I think everybody that didn't mark that last year can remember that they got a phone call. I don't want that to be an issue. And even though I made a lot of phone calls last year and verified the best that I could, there were still a couple of our producers who were not eligible or able to get paid for their bulls. And so one of them was because it didn't qualify, and one of them was because they hadn't marked for bulls. And so, you know, I hate when that happens. And so willing to work with anybody. That's why we call, and we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to get it right. I will say this, things change. And if they do change, give me a call. If you realize that you selected a wrong program, investment area, give me a call and I'll reach out to the board. The board will work with anyone that will, wants to be worked with. I'll just put it that way. We want to help all the farmers and all the producers the best we can. Okay, something else that we look for, that the state looks for, is if you'll notice over here where it says select no more than 3 investments, the top right-hand corner of that list, there is a box. Oh, you'll see the eligible costs. Now, a little bit further down, Lindy, you're okay. If you look at investment areas, there's an eligible for cost share up to the $5,000. And then the box next to it is where we'd like to see your plan and how much you plan on spending in that particular area. Now, I know it's a guesstimate. It really is. Are you going to spend your whole $5,000 or $10,000 in that area? Or are you going to do multiple somewhere else, split it up? Yep, $2,000 there. Maybe you're going to come down to small animal, another $2,000. And you just want to put in there how much you would like to get in that particular investment area. Now, when you do your report, which is what you do when you turn in all your paperwork, when you do your report, that's where you will tell me exactly how much you spent. Okay, that's where I'm going to be looking for that. When you do your producer report, you're going to, if you had selected agricultural diversification, and you did a project in that area, you're going to put what you did. And I don't know if we can get that up, Lindy, if you can get that producer report back up. Yeah, scroll down. A little bit more, almost there. There it is, right there. So you did that. You're going to circle for me which area you did. So if you did commercial horticultural production, just circle that A for me. And then come down here and put down what you actually did. And there's a place here for the cost, how much you actually spent. Yep. And then you put down how much you actually spent. Now, you don't have to worry about the $5,000 or the $10,000 maximum and the $5,000 maximum payout. I just want you to put down everything that you spent in that area. Because it is possible some of those things won't be qualified for that specific area. We may have to take some of them out and then refigure the numbers. But everything that you believe applied to that you spent for that program, that's the amount of money we want you to put in there. If you did a large animal one, now this is one that's a little different on this form. If you do large animal, you are required to have a current BQA number. I did have several producers whose BQAs expired over the year time frame. If you might want to check your BQA status and see when it expires, and if it expires before the November end date, then you need to go get it redone. And you can do that online. It's not difficult to do online. And I don't know, Lindy, if there's going to be a BQA class in person or not. But it's something to look at now so that it's not going to be an issue later. And I don't have to call and kind of put pressure on you saying your BQA is not up to date, 2 weeks before you were expecting to get a check. I don't like to do that. And I know you guys wouldn't like that either. So if you do large animal, please check and make sure your BQA is good through our time frame for this program, which is July 1st. Okay, I really don't think we need to do a whole lot. Whatever 3 projects you do, you want to make sure, circle the area of that particular grant area. So small animals, did you do holding facilities for them? Did you do rabbits? Whatever it is that you did, fill in what you did on your project and then the total amount you spent, okay? And you do that up to 3 times. And if you spend $30,000, that's okay. The math will work itself out on how much we're able to pay you. But it is important for us to know that we want to know what you did, because the state wants to know what you did. And the more accurate information you can put in here, the more accurate the state receives. And it just keeps this program going because we see the value in it. I don't think there's anything else that we need to worry about there. Again, I would just emphasize this: when you put your packets together, or when you're purchasing your fencing materials or whatever it is that you're purchasing, try to keep that separate from anything else. That way, if we get clean receipts, it just makes it so much easier for the board to be able to go through, do a final review of it, and get it knocked out quicker without a lot of us having to go through taking things off and that type of thing. So I will say that this year they were much cleaner than the first year that I did them. So I really appreciated that. But if kind of keep that in mind. And of course, the last thing she's got highlighted here is a signature. So make sure you sign it and print your name and then date it. Now this is, I don't have very great handwriting either. So I'm going to jokingly say, make sure it's legible. There were a few times I couldn't read it and made some calls and just asked for clarifications, but we want to be able to read everything that you put on there so that I can accurately put it into the system and for our reporting to the state. All right, Leanne, I don't think there's anything else that we need to cover on that, unless there's something I missed that you want to cover.
The only thing that I have is, again, in this packet is again just made to help you be successful. So if in doubt, when something is due, you can look for this cover page in your packet and break it out behind there, and it'll tell you when it's due with deadlines. But there's also the quick reference questions. So these are some of the frequently asked questions that we get. And if you follow this, you will be successful in completing your paperwork and making sure that you have everything that you need. But again, if you have questions, we're available. Last year, there were quite a few who scheduled appointments with me to review their paperwork, and I am totally okay with that, but not in the last 2 weeks. So just be mindful of that. That's why I encourage you to set a reminder in your phone that says June 1st. That way it gives you a month to finish wrapping up paperwork, tracking down some of those proof of payments, or just completing your project. But like Greg said, with the application and the retroactivity dates, a lot of you might have projects that are already completed
Right.
with eligible things on them. So you could turn in your application, and by the time that you get your letter back, you might have already gathered most of your materials and you might have enough to turn in. Don't feel the need to do so immediately if you haven't spent your maximum amount in case you want to add something. But once you're finalized and complete with your projects, you can go ahead and turn those in, and it's one less thing to do, and we can hold it and be your paper keeper for you. But we're not going to be drop a receipt off, come drop another receipt off, everything all at once your project is complete. But this packet is helpful. Just one more resource that's in this is the producer checklist. So, if you're going through this, you can mark, have you completed your project? Sure have. Have you done your educational class? Yep. If you don't know where your educational class is, this tells you where to find them. Again, if you update your email address, I will try to send you weekly reminders, or when things are timely at least, so that you'll have that easily for you. But you can go down through here and just check off once you have all your itemization forms, all your itemized receipts that are listed on your itemization forms, your proof of payments that all match up. And you can go through this checklist, and it's super helpful. And then it breaks down into each of the program areas. So the new addition this year is this genomically tested one. So if you want more information, you can scan this little QR code here with your phone. You just hover your phone over top of it in most cases. Sometimes your phone may be finicky. Like mine won't read it from the computer screen, but on the paper, all I have to do is hold my phone over it and it'll read it and pull up a video. But again, we'll have more of those educational classes for you. They will both be in person and virtual. So there will be mixed opportunities. There will probably be way more virtual opportunities, and I can tell you that right now, than there are in person, but we will make sure we get you taken care of on your educational class, assuming I'm much friendlier before April. After April, I start to travel a lot and outside a lot. So don't keep me confined to my desk during that time. But in all seriousness, we're here to help you and just make sure you're successful. So at the end of the day, right now, what you need to do is tomorrow or sometime next week, swing by the extension office, either in the office or after hours. You can swing by the drive-through behind and sort through the box. We have all the materials available for you, ready to pick up. The primary thing you need to pick up is your actual application packet, which is signified by the bright orange carrot on the front. And then any of the rules for the programs that you want. So get that turned in by November 12th at 3 p.m. to the extension office, and just bring that packet in its entirety. Staff here will pull off what you need, but I ask that you keep your questions to me and Greg. Staff are not expected to know everything and all the inner workings of the program, but you can definitely reach out to us, and our contact information, both of our cell phones are on there and both of our emails are on there, and we're pretty quick to respond on both of those. So I hope that you have a good evening, and we're going to go ahead and stay on for any additional questions.